All right, panelists, let's have you introduce yourselves and then we'll get going on our questions. So Neil, we'll start with you.
Neil McQueen, here in Westerville, Ohio, Presbyterian minister and Christian educator, and thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much. Okay, Ron and Deanna.
Reverend Ron Shively, Deanna and I have helped develop rotation Sunday school in churches in Ohio, South Dakota, and currently here in Texas.
Cool.
I am the youth minister here at Emmanuel. So.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing your expertise with us. And Luann.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Luann here. I'm at Hampton, Ontario, Canada. I am in a small rural community, and we've been using the rotation model since 2000 with small group of children.
Thank you. Great. Okay, here we go. Question 1. This is going to be directed to Neil. So what do we mean when we say small Sunday school?
The first answer to that is any kind of small Sunday school. We're going to try to address small Sunday school issues and needs and solutions for both rotation model churches and traditional Sunday schools and any other kind of Sunday school. I've served in churches that had 150 kids in Sunday school, and I've served churches that had 10 kids in Sunday school, both traditional model and rotation model churches. In fact, I've served in two churches with two small churches with small Sunday schools where we both enacted the rotation model as part of our solution. We'll talk more about solutions later. And in both of those churches, we were able to grow out of some of our problems, not all of them. So by small, I might say, I had a Sunday school where I had 8 kids enrolled, grades 1 through 6. That's small.
Thank you. All right, Ron and Deanna, what were the challenges of doing Sunday school, of doing small Sunday school? And then what are some of the things that you did to meet that challenge?
One of the biggest challenges was trying to figure out how to schedule things so that kids were getting all the rotations, and so we were having, because you're missing a lot of times a rotation because of lack of attendance. And so we've done spreadsheets to try to map out, make sure we know where everybody's been at. And so we're not missing anybody on that part. One of the other frustrations or challenges is teacher frustration. Teachers prep for a lesson, and then there's no kids, because, you've got, maybe you're prepping for 2 or 3 rotations on a Sunday. And that's a tough challenge because, you're all prepped, you're ready to go. And the only way you can kind of work through that if you don't have any kids in your learning center is to combine, as an assistant for somebody else and take the Sunday off. And then, of course, the third big challenge in doing a small Sunday school is not being able to use some of the large group activities or games that are in the lesson plans that rotation might have. There's some really cool activities, but they're meant for 15 kids, and then you're having to scale back. And so you have to reinvent the wheel and look at the lesson or the game and figure out how to make it more condensed for a smaller group, and so that's some of the ways to get through that challenge.
One of the biggest disappointments or challenges I've had in small Sunday schools is kids being disappointed when they see small attendance and well-meaning teachers and helpers going, well, I see only 3 of you came today. And you just sort of can create this pall over it. I also had trouble sometimes convincing parents that our small Sunday school wasn't failing. It was just small. So part of dealing with small Sunday school for me has been a PR job. with the kids and with the parents that small can be beautiful.
One of the things one of the pastors I work with shared with me one time is to not worry about numbers and let God worry about numbers, but what you do with intention and authenticity and excellence, and then the numbers will happen. Or he also said, be careful what you pray for.
Mhm.
All right. Hey, Ron and Deanna. What were some of the nice things about leading and teaching a small Sunday school?
One of the things is you get more one-on-one time with those kids. They open up so much more when there's a smaller group. So you get to know them on a personal level. Another thing is we've always had a computer lab in ours. So they get more computer time. They don't have to share a computer with another child.
And then one of the other really blessings is in art. Sometimes you think that by a small group, your options for art are a little more limited. Well, I look at it as you can go more extravagant in what you can buy, because you've got a smaller group of kids, and you can make a more intricate treasure art piece that the kids will be able to take home, and so the budget doesn't matter as much, because you're not buying for 20 kids per a time. Maybe you're only buying for the 8 for the month, and so you can beef up the artistic gems that the kids will get.
Yeah, and I'll just say that you really form a close relationship with those kids. I mean, when you step in the back of the church, you have kids waving madly from the pews at you, and they're comfortable with you when you go downstairs and work with them.
If I could go back to solutions for a moment, I had written down a couple of answers to that, because it is a blessing sometimes to have a small group that you get to know more intimately. But there's a two-edged sword too, because sometimes that also creates challenges. One of the things, for example, at rotation.org is we started putting in all sorts of adaptations in the writing team lesson sets for small groups, in answer to what Ron was talking about, where you find these old school lesson plans that were too involved, or assumed you had 8 kids or 15 kids. And so we've really tried to adapt down, and finding that material, I think, is critical. You still see it in a lot of published curriculum. They assume you have 6 or 8 kids there. So finding the right material that adapts down for small groups is one of the big solutions. I also got really good at predicting when we would have low attendance Sundays. And part of that was through social media. I would talk to the parents, and the parents would talk to me and say, we've got that soccer tournament this week, so I'm taking my son and daughter. And there goes a third of my Sunday school class. And so having a heads up on that, using communication tools to be able to adjust. And that's one of the, I think, and I put in a commercial for Rotation Moss. One of the beauties of it is, you're staying on the same story for a couple of weeks, so you can switch the lesson plans and not skip a Bible story. You can switch which workshop you're going to do, pick a workshop that works better with the 4 kids are coming, rather than 6 you were hoping were coming.
Neil, how did you handle having older kids included with younger kids? This is a question that a lot of people were asking as they were registering for this chat. Like, how do you keep younger kids interested when you're going deeper with older kids? And how do you keep the older kids interested when you're really focusing in on the story with the younger kids and all of that?
Yeah, I think that's a huge question. I've had that question myself, and I've been asked that question so many times over the years. I think a lot depends on the personality of the older kid. Some older kids do fine in a younger peer group. They don't mind, the 5th grader doesn't mind being with 3rd graders or 2nd graders. Some of them actually flourish when they're not with somebody their own age, but with somebody they feel a little more safe and comfortable, and not so pressured to be a 5th grader. They can sort of let down their guard around a 1st or 2nd grader. So in a small Sunday school, that's harder in a large Sunday school to do that, to tailor, to fit in a 5th grader with younger kids on occasion. Whereas in a smaller Sunday school, you can really tailor how you fit them in. I always appealed to their self-esteem, to their sense of leadership, no matter whether they had any leadership at all. I mean, I think it's an old teacher's trick to give them things to do. And sometimes, some of the old techniques are the best. Pull them in. We had one girl named of Audrey who on one Sunday school lesson, I don't know how it came about, but we started calling her Big Sis. And that name stuck. And that's what we started writing on her name tag. And that's how she felt in the class. And that was her sort of way she fit into the Sunday school. There are going to be kids, though, that just aren't going to fit in. And maybe Sunday school isn't right for them. And you just kind of have to find something else a little bit different, or find the ones that like the computer lab or like the art, and once again, encourage them to show up for those things that that they do like. And that's where being a good communicator really helps.
What about tips for readers and non-readers in the same group?
I'll go first on that. I think non-readers are easier to deal with. They are so used to being read to, it doesn't faze them that when you say, okay, let's have some of the older kids read this. And the older kids like to be treated like the older kids, have their skill set, tapped. And the real problem comes with physical activities, where if you're playing a big game, the older kids can just mow over the little kids. So you have to watch what kind of games you're planning. Can also be a problem with knowledge. If you're doing knowledge-based games, a quiz game, for example, then your younger kids are going to really struggle with it, and you don't want to dumb it down. For years, I believe from my own experience, and I've been telling people, it's a lot easier to get a lesson for older kids and adapt it down to younger kids than to start with a lesson for little kids and try to convince the older kids that they should be enjoying it too. So sometimes picking what you're doing is picking the activity, the style of activity is the answer to that. How do you involve younger kids, the non-readers?
Catherine's got a comment in the chat about setting up a buddy system with older and younger kids, or giving previews to people. Another question that came in about that is like working with siblings in the same classroom that thought.
We just are very intentional in separating them as they come in, which is one of the nice things about having those relationships in the small group, is you get to know the siblings that don't mind being together, and then you get to know the ones that do better if they can be kind of in different parts of the lesson, in different parts of the room.
So very relational. That's one of the great things about small group Sunday school. Luann, how do you deal with attendance fluctuations in Sunday school?
We've learned to be really flexible. We sometimes use a split and combined approach, depending who shows up and the ages. But generally, because we're so small, we stick together. And for example, the first Sunday we might do the video workshop. And then the next Sunday, we turn out to have a whole different group of kids from the first Sunday. And so we will repeat the video workshop, and which might screw up. We maybe planned for 4 weeks, 4 different workshops. So we might end up dumping one. But if we felt the video was the more important of the for coverage, then yeah. So our teacher, there's one teacher and myself. And so we'll both plan for the 4 weeks, knowing that we might prepare for cooking workshop and it might not get done to the 4th Sunday, or might not get done at all. I remember one Sunday, on an Easter Sunday, having 24 kids show up, and I'm sitting in my pew counting heads and thinking, oh my goodness, I don't have another teacher on hand. I was going to do the video workshop. We have 12 seats in the movie theater. I got very creative that day and had many God moments. I had showed a video with 24 kids in a 12-seat movie theater, and I didn't have one kid complain when they were stacked in there. It was one of the best workshops I ever had. And so yeah, that's a big thing. It's just being flexible and thinking when you're planning that, you don't want to pick a game that's going to require a lot of kids. Computer workshop, you can always go down to just one child. We do a story table workshop that works for all kids because we include videoing, taping in it, and that will work down to 1 kid or 6 kids. So yeah, picking those workshops that will work for a small group, or doing a skit with just where you realize you just have to have something that just will use 2 kids, or some of the ways we get around that.
The hard part about being flexible in a traditional program where the story changes every week is that if you have a lesson that your attendance isn't going to support and you can't pull off because of those wild fluctuations in attendance, you have to choose between, ditching your entire lesson about Moses on Mount Sinai, and you have nothing, you haven't looked ahead maybe, and you don't have a plan for something to replace it. So you end up just sort of booting the whole Sunday plan and going and have cookies and fellowship ball, or showing a VeggieTales video. That was the old backup. The beauty of rotation model, if I can put in a commercial for it, is that you're going to be staying on that story for a couple of weeks in a row. So if you have a low attendance Sunday or a really high attendance Sunday, and you know what your 3 or 4 lesson plans are, and you have them already supplied, you can do what Luann is saying. You can shift gears really quick. You can say, well, let's do the video workshop, or let's not do the video workshop. Let's shift gears and do the art workshop. Because often in a small Sunday school, let's be honest, it's the same teacher. It's, in a larger rotation Sunday school, it's maybe a different teacher each week doing a different workshop. But in small Sunday schools, I'm there 3 or 4 weeks out of the rotation. So I can make those shifts on the fly, standing there saying, this isn't going to work to do this Bible skills and games workshop today. I'm going to punt and let's do the video, or let's do the art workshop.
The story table workshop too is really an intriguing thing that I think I want to just touch on for a second, Luann, because I'm not sure if everybody knows what that is. And correct me if I'm wrong, because it's something that I'm just introducing at our church. But you have like Legos or different things to build with, or Lincoln Logs, all Playmobil people, and kids create the scene of the story and create the story, which really can be adaptive, and kids can use their imaginations at all different age levels.
Yeah, and I was just going to say with that, I have a tripod with a camera on it. And so once the kids create a scene, then they get behind the camera and they take photos. But the kids get quite intense in setting up their scene, and you kind of look at it as setting up a movie. And so then it works for all the older kids as well.
It's a much better idea than a drama workshop, which you hear about in rotation circles. The story table is, because with drama workshops, you often need 4, 5, 6 kids to pull it off. But if you're doing story table, those kids don't care if there's if there's only 2 or 3 of them, they get to do the entire kit. They get to do everything. So they're not sitting there waiting their turn. They're very much involved. Great example of how looking at all the activities you have at your disposal, picking the kinds of workshops and the styles of teaching techniques can really help you adjust all those fluctuations.
Luann, how do you creatively solve your limited space issues?
Okay, and our church is 148 years old, country church, but we have 3 designated rooms, an art room, a story table room, and a video workshop, but they are only 9 feet by 10 feet. So they are tiny, and there's no storage in an old church. Stools are wonderful. Stools are great around an art table, take up less space, easy to work or reach around the children, and children to work around, get up, sit down to collect things. Computer lab, they're great in. We've used them in the movie theater along one wall when we need extra seating. We now have we've upgraded to a flat screen TV, and there's a hole underneath where the DVD player goes. We're a 2-point charge. Our sister church just has 1 open basement, and they created a sort of like a quilt that they could hang halfway down so that they could separate into 2 classrooms to help with the noise volume.
I've been in 2 rotation churches, one of which had no space issue because all their classrooms were designed for their 1960 attendance, and the church had severely shrunk. And I've been in a church that bought a building, and all the classrooms were old small offices. I think the biggest limitation on space is the imagination of the property committee to give permission to do things. We hassled them for over a year to get them to knock out a wall, and it made a huge difference to our Sunday school. And what we did with it, it impressed them, and they started giving us more permission. We also had to think about how we wanted to teach in those different rooms, and those ideas changed. Luann was talking about theater seats. We abandoned the sort of traditional, you see them in rotation photos where the video workshop or theater workshop has these real theater seats. Well, we had rooms now that had to be 2 or 3 different things. And so we started working towards lightweight. We got rid of all the heavy tables that the teachers couldn't move, and we got the lightweight foldable tables from Costco. We got rid of the furniture, the heavy seating that we would use in a theater workshop in another church, and put in plastic Adirondack chairs that the kids could walk around and get out and restack. I think that space issues usually are, unless you have a daycare, and I've only had one experience in a church with a daycare where they were the immovable object. If you have a daycare, that's a whole nother can of worms. But every other rotation church or traditional church I've been in, it seems to be more a limitation of permissions and imagination that we were fighting.
And that's for sure. I know when we were serving a church in Ohio, there wasn't enough space for classrooms, but there were sure enough storage rooms. And so we got permission to empty out 2 storage rooms. We threw out so much stuff, and suddenly we had room for a computer lab that no one would ever have guessed that we could have put in, and a storytelling room. And it was just 2 wonderful spaces, but had been filled with junk for 15 years. And suddenly the church had 2 more classrooms that they never thought they could have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a lot of creative solutions out there that I've just, at our site, we've seen people post, and I've borrowed a lot of those solutions. We've in the fellowship hall solution, we put up tents. One of the best summer Sunday schools I ever did. We erected a tents in the fellowship hall to be our classrooms, and the kids thought they had died and gone to heaven. They're just simple tents that people loaned us. A couple of old Christmas trees to make it look like a forest. It was eye-opening.
The problem with having small space is also your storage limitations, but also it means when you store stuff, it's spread everywhere and often hard to get at. And so I have it's a Canadian company, but it's called ResourceMate, and it's a library software. And I'm sure different in the States, they would have software programs, but I input everything I have in that software, and it's by subject, which is by Bible story. So I can go in there and say, what do I have in the church for Jonah? And it will list every puppet, every game, every book, every story table prop, every computer software program that will work with that story and where it's located. I wouldn't be without it.
Luann has the title at our site of, we call her the resource lady. She used to also work in a Christian bookstore, and there's a super powerful button at our website that is go to the teacher's lounge and ask a question. And when you do that, you have people like Luann looking at your question and coming back to you with, yeah, I know where that resource is. And she'll even give you the ISBN to it, tell you where you can find it, or if it's out of print, tell you where you can find it out of print.
Ron and Deanna, what aspect of the rotation model did you use and find helpful for your small Sunday school?
Well, number one, it's flexible. I think we've talked about that multiple times, that if you do only have 1 child or 2 child, you can move to a different aspect of the rotation.
And that there's a lot of options. That's the one thing when you look at the stories, the different stories in the forums, you may have, lessons that are written by the writing team, but you also have lessons that have been written by a number of other churches potentially through the years too. And so one craft or game may not work out because of the size of your church, but through all the other options that people have written and shared, which is one of the blessings of our community, is that we're sharing all these ideas, is that you can find different extra options for your lesson. The other thing is, by seeing all these options that are out there, helps you as a teacher or as a pastor begin saying, hey, we don't have to just rely on what's printed. We can maybe start writing our own curriculum. And so if there are a missing module on a rotation, or even a missing story, you can start saying, what would we do now to begin writing that story for our lesson plans for our kids? Knowing the size of group we have and the kids we have. And that's been for our ministry, that's been really exciting.
One of the things that I think is just true about any kind of creative teaching is that, if I'm a fifth grader and I'm bored by what you're doing, I'm really feeling like I want to be out of here and don't want to come back. And it's real easy to say, I don't want to be with the first graders. But if that kid is engaged, if that kid is having a fun, if that kid is feeling the surprises and the excitement of what's going on, if they're engaged in what's happening in front of them rather than looking across the room at these weird looking first and second graders, that older kid is not thinking that they're out of place. They're thinking they're in the right place. So a lot of our solutions are about come back to what are we doing? And if you're sitting around a table and a bunch of folding chairs, even in a large Sunday school, it's hard. In a small Sunday school, it's almost deadly. It's almost deadly because you're going to get to a point where you just can't have a sustainable class size.
So Neil, what things about using the rotation model did you change for your small program or for room setup?
Well, I mentioned one of them earlier, which is getting rid of the conventional old approach to furniture and tables and cabinets. Almost every rotation model I've helped set up, or in my own churches, we've unloaded filing cabinets, things that other groups had stored in our classrooms, opening up the space, especially in small classrooms, and having movable things, stackable furniture, tables that a teacher move. In a small church, typically don't have a janitor. We had, in my last small church in Florida, we had this lovely couple who came in and cleaned the church every Saturday night. They were not going to move tables and chairs for us. We had to provide all that. And so making sure that we could move things was really important. Of course, I'm a big fan of computers in Sunday school. It's sort of like misdirection. Instead of looking at each other and wondering, why am I with these kids? You're engaging them in something that's really exciting. And the rotation model sort of has that built into its DNA. In fact, that's something on the writing team we talk about all the time, is make sure your opening is engaging. Because if it's not, the first kids you're going to lose are those older kids. And those are the ones who are making decisions for Christ. It's not your first graders. It's those fourth and fifth graders that are at the prime time for making a life-changing decision. And so they're the kids we really don't want to lose. One of the other things that we did that really helped our program was we said, instead of every year getting rid of our sixth graders, in a small church, sometimes our 1 or 2 sixth graders were friends with the fifth grader, and we were going to send them up to the youth group where all the kids, the youth class, where the 3 kids in that class were all high schoolers. And this idea that you have to grade everybody and move everybody every year in a small church, that really hurt a 5th or 6th grader. So one of the things we started doing was looking at who the kids were in our upper end and saying, do we want them to move on? Are they ready to move on? Do they want to move on? If they're friends, we had one case where the 2 best friends, one was a 5th grader, one was a 6th grader. We had no 7th and 8th graders in the church. So what were we going to do that 6th grader, send them up to the youth class? We had people resist that idea because it was so ingrained that you got to move kids up. But when we asked the kids, they wanted to stay with their friends. It's harder when you're dealing with 4 and 5-year-olds because now you have some serious developmental differences. some 4-year-olds. I have a 4-year-old grandson. There's no way he can be in with my first graders. No way. But there are some kindergartners who can. So again, it comes down in a small church, you have the option to really look at the individual child and say what's best, and get rid of your preconceived notions about grades. And who says that this year we can't add the 6th graders? And eventually what happened in the church when I was in Hilliard, Ohio, was we kept our 5th and 6th graders together. We kept them together as 6th and 7th graders. They wanted to stay in rotation. We kept them together as 7th and 8th graders too. We kept them together because they were a natural group and they encouraged each other to attend.
Thank you. Luann, what things have you done to grow your attendance?
Okay, I've never had any big success with increasing Sunday school attendance. And I've tried everything. And so I won't go into that, but what we did back in 2017 was I had the lady who does the Mom and Tots group at the church on Friday mornings approach me and the minister first, and then I got involved about doing a girls' night, church girls' night group. And so we started, we started with ages 6 to 10. And before 6 months was out, we had 10 kids coming every Monday night. By the end of the second year, we had 15 girls coming out. And as the older girls we had to increase our age because they didn't want to leave. So we went from 6 to 12 and they loved it. And we incorporated our rotation. We had sometimes the kids move around. Sometimes we just met in the big room. It did not
awesome.
increase our Sunday morning attendance, but we were reaching 15 kids we would not otherwise have reached. Pretty amazing. And if anyone told me I'd be camping at this age, I would have said you're crazy, but I did it.
That sort of raises the question of the future of Sunday school, and the future of Sunday school is probably not going to be on Sunday for a lot of churches. And what you did is a beautiful example of that, going where the kids are. I had similar experience here in Ohio where took a fellowship program that had 3 kids showing up to it and really went to town on it and started doing Sunday school like lessons. A lot of fellowship programs and leaders and materials, they turn their nose up at anything that looks like a serious, fun Bible lesson. They say that's for Sunday school. We incorporated it right in our fellowship program for kids. Kids thought it was just fine and normal. And one of the consequences was it also boosted our Sunday morning attendance. Why? Because the kids got to know each other and wanted to be with each other. So sometimes it works when you boost that fellowship attendance and provide serious, maybe serious isn't the word, but legit Bible education like you do on Sunday morning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we moved our Sunday school from Sundays to Wednesdays. Families could get there to worship, or somehow they couldn't get them to Sunday school. But on Wednesday night, church night, that was available for them. They were able to bring their kids and willing to bring their kids. And we had a lot bigger attendance on Wednesday nights. And so Wednesday nights became Sunday school for elementary kids.
It's cool.
Yeah, we found that we had the girls who had younger brothers wanted to know why they couldn't have a group come to or have a group. And we just, I would like to do that with boys, but we just, didn't get to it yet.
That's awesome. One of the things that I have found as a tip too is asking parents to do one little small thing, like, would you be willing to put the prayer table away after Sunday school? Or would you be the person that goes around and collects the offering from the rooms? Or just finding little things that they don't have to do any prep for, but that it's, I have a responsibility. I need to do this. So we're going to get to church. So finding little ways to nudge and encourage parents to get there also helps too. And it builds ownership of the program. And if people have ownership, they will be there. In the chat, and thank you panelists, that's our formal questions, and we have time for questions that you all have asked as well. And does anybody have your classes start out whole group and then split into younger and older kids? Does anybody have experience with that? Ian, go for it.
Yeah, so not the church I'm at now because we're too little to do that. So, but the church I was at before, we had everybody come together for like the worship rally. And that was twofold. It was kind of so we had one drop off point for all of our kids. So it made it easy on parents. So we had the one door that they came in, they checked in, they came in that door, and then all the kids came in the same room. So then when we do our worship rally, we would do like an intro to the lesson for that day. And that's where we would maybe read part of the story that we were going over, kind of take it by piece if we wanted to. And so that would last about 10 minutes. And then from there, they would break off into we had a closed doors where they could go out back doors into different classrooms. So it made sure that all the teachers were on the same page, made sure all the kids were on the same page. They knew what they were going to be learning that day. And they would go do their lesson for about 35 minutes, and then they would all come back together and we would close with worship.
Ian, you mentioned 35 minutes, and that's something that it's another one of those changes in Sunday school that I think has been coming with every decade. It used to be, when I was doing Sunday school in the late 70s, early 80s, when I started, we had an hour. Sometimes we had an hour and 15 minutes. I know people who had 2 hours. The writing teams had a lot of discussions about that over the years, and we've kind of come to the conclusion that 35, 40 minutes is pretty much sort of the as low as we can go. 10 years from now, we might be saying 15 or 20, but right now we're like, yeah, to develop anything creative that doesn't feel rushed. It takes a little bit of time. I know a lot of early rotation churches did the sort of large group meet in the room. They would have some music announcements. It was the way they put music into their program. In a small church, sometimes that's kind of hard because it's hard to put 6 kids in a children's church kind of atmosphere and not feel like there's not enough energy there.
Cool. Well, this has been really, really great. There's been a lot of talk about what's available to you on the rotation site, and especially the writing team lessons. Those are available if you're a supporting member, which is $45 a year, which is, to me, just personally, that's an amazing price for all that you get. So if you're not a supporting member, I would encourage you to become one. And the other thing that we do is just so that like the people who write the writing team sets, they're all volunteers. They're like people like you and me. And if that's something that you're ever interested in, like, how can I be involved in the 25th anniversary celebration? Or, hey, I'd like to see rotation org do blah, blah, blah. I invite you, Amy, can you wave to get in touch with Amy Crane, and we'll put her address in there. And she is a great empowerer of people and would love to talk with you about ways to get involved, because the power of our community is sharing ideas. So if you with Ron and Deanna and Megan, I know, and Debbie Fisher and different people, they are writing stuff at their sites and then they post them on the rotation site for people to use. And it's just a great resource.
Let your teachers know too about the Teachers Lounge.
Yeah.
They post a message Saturday morning when they're trying to figure out a lesson plan for Sunday. They're going to get Christian educators and creative teachers responding back to them, not just about stuff at the site, but there have been times when we've literally helped write their lesson plan. So let your folks know, especially in a small church, you can kind of feel really alone. And I think that's one of the strengths of rotation.org. It lets you know that you're part of a community.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to ask Kathy to close us with prayer.